This episode is brought to you by ProMensal.
Perimenopause and menopause are a huge challenge to that because, as we were talking about earlier, that body composition changes and it's like, uh-oh, how am I going to manage this? And it's like, maybe I'll restrict my eating.
Welcome to Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Magazine. I'm Zoe Mernier, the editor of Prevention, and I'll be taking over hosting duties from the wonderful Andrea Duval. I'm sure you'll join me in congratulating her for doing such an incredible job hosting the podcast for the last 7 series. So today on the podcast, we're going to be discussing just what happens to our sense of self during perimenopause, when the physical changes that happen to our body in midlife can really shake up our feelings about our worth in a world that places such a strong emphasis on youthful beauty standards. So much so, in fact, that figures show an uptick in eating disorders for women going through perimenopause. To explore this topic further, I'm joined by Associate Professor Gemma Sharp, Department of Neuroscience and Senior Clinical Psychologist at Monash University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sharp.
Thank you so much for having me, Zoe. How exciting to be a part of the podcast.
Oh, our pleasure. Absolutely. So let's start by talking about some of the ways our sense of self and self-worth typically evolve during the changes that occur during midlife and perimenopause.
So a huge question, Zoe, and I wanted to say from the outset for your listeners that I really wish we had more research in this space. It is so under-researched. It's something that my team is hoping to change, but I can certainly talk about what we do know and my clinical experiences. And of course, if people want to support research, they're more than welcome to contact me. But as you said, there are substantial changes that happen in midlife, and these are from a number of different perspectives. So I suppose from our lifestyle and environment, generally speaking, women in midlife, they might be at a certain point in their careers. They may have caring responsibilities. They may have elderly parents they're looking after, as well as little people, all happening at once. So it can be one of the busiest times of a woman's life, and she might be feeling like she's stretched in a million directions at once. And sometimes that can really take a toll on our sense of self if we're sort of looking after everyone else's needs and we don't have time to attend to our own. So that's, I suppose, lifestyle, occupation, socially. But of course, in perimenopause and menopause, there's also those huge hormonal changes.
Yes.
I mean, we all, I suppose, when people are going through puberty, we're very understanding of these like huge emotional and personality changes that can occur. But menopause is just as dramatic in terms of physiologically. So, and what it does mean is that there are changes in our bodies, changes in our mind, changes in our abilities to emotionally cope with things as readily as we may have before. And I think these can all have an impact on how we view ourselves and potentially, I suppose, comparing ourselves to pre-menopause, how we may have functioned and coped with certain things. And sometimes that comparison can be pretty unhelpful.
Absolutely. So what are some of the common body image concerns or challenges that women may experience during menopause, and what are some of the typical ways that that women respond to those?
Absolutely. And I think body image, remaining body positive is a lifelong challenge, isn't it? Particularly for women. It never seems to let up, at least from our research. So I think what happens, just as in puberty, just as in pregnancy, there's bodily changes which result as a result of hormonal changes. So what can happen, and I should say this doesn't happen for everyone, but for some people at least, there can be changes in weight and body composition. So sometimes we accumulate weight in sort of different areas than we used to before. So rather than the sort of the hips and the buttocks, it might move more to that midsection. And that can be really, really distressing for people. But sometimes it's no weight change at all. It's literally just the perception of our bodies that has changed as a result of the hormones' impacts on our mind and our ability to process our bodies. So it might not be a number on the scale. Right. It might literally be just how we view ourselves.
That's interesting.
And of course, exactly. And with any changes in body, we can absolutely be distressed, I think. Because unfortunately society tells us, and I think there are maybe some people out there, maybe some Hollywood influencers who seem to get through this menopause phase and don't look any different whatsoever. In fact, maybe even look better. And we're like, oh, that's not my experience. So I think there is maybe the expectation societally that we just continue on and look the same as we did before, whereas our bodies are saying, no, there's a different stage of life going on here physiologically, and it's probably likely that you will seem different. You might lose some muscle tone as well. That doesn't mean you can't be fit and healthy, of course, but there is a change in body composition usually.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can we, as you said, when we're sort of surrounded by, these youthful ideals of beauty and these societal pressures that we should waltz on through like barely unchanged, how can we navigate these pressures? Are there any kind of strategies or techniques that women can use to help maintain a positive self-image? I'm sure if anyone knew the answer to that question, we'd probably, but yeah.
I'd gladly retire. Work on something else. That would be the holy grail, wouldn't it? I think it's an interesting question, and certainly with my clinical experience in eating disorders, this is something like everyone can benefit from, not just people who are doing eating disorder therapy. And something that I ask people to do is to nominate what makes up their self-evaluation, what gives them a sense of self. And generally speaking, people who are struggling with body image concerns and eating disorders will put their physical appearance as a big slice of the pie, which is quite understandable.
Yeah.
But people who fare best are usually people who have multiple different slices. So it might be how they view themselves in their work, how they view themselves as a parent, for example, how they view themselves as a friend, hobbies, all these kinds of things. The more we have on that list, the better, because we're not, I suppose, relying on our body's appearance to give us our sense of self entirely. We're like, actually, this is going quite well in my life. I'm going to really invest in that. So I think it's about having a broad self-evaluation and sense of self that taps into lots of different areas of life.
We'll be right back after this.
Perimenopause can actually start in your 40s. Declining estrogen production during perimenopause brings on changes to menstrual cycles and often the onset of hot flushes, night sweats, mood swings and sexual problems. Promensal Peri is specifically designed for perimenopausal women and can help relieve these common menopausal symptoms. Promensal Peri is available at leading pharmacies across Australia and offers a cost-effective treatment at under $1 a day. When things start to change, try Promensal Peri. Always read the label and follow the directions for use.
Okay, we're back.
So obviously, yes, you have done a lot of work in eating disorders. So how does perimenopause itself impact the development or exacerbation of eating disorders? Are there any specific like psychological or emotional changes that take place that feed into that, so to speak?
Nice one. I like it. There's always so many food puns in eating disorders.
Wasn't even intended.
Well, I liked it anyway. So it's a really good point, Zoe, and research that we're doing right now, it shows either that the person has had a long-standing eating disorder and perimenopause exacerbates it, or it can even be the emergence of an eating disorder during perimenopause and menopause. I think more commonly it's that the person's had the eating disorder previously and it's unfortunately become worse again. But what we often find is with these hormonal changes, so it makes people feel like their body is out of control, which it is really, isn't it? We're not sort of going, hey, let's reduce my estrogen. I haven't seen anyone say that. I'm sure someone will write in and tell me. So again, kind of like puberty, it's like, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff happening and I'm not in control of it.
Yeah.
And I suppose the core psychopathology that we talk about in eating disorders is weight and shape and its control. That's what people want if they're experiencing an eating disorder. They have an over-evaluation of the control of their body weight and shape. And perimenopause and menopause are a huge challenge to that because, as we were talking about earlier, that body composition changes and it's like, uh-oh, how am I going to manage this? And it's like, maybe I'll restrict my eating.
Yeah.
But I'm recommending that to any of your listeners. But it's like, well, what is within my control? Okay, my dietary intake. I'm going to focus on that. And unfortunately, that can become quite an obsession. And certainly in our kind of diet culture milieu in which we exist, there's so much support of that type of unhelpful thinking. So people will just go, of course you're trying to lose weight. That's a great idea. Yes, I might do that too. There's no one going, hey, I think this is quite out of control. So it's, I suppose, a real slippery slope there. So I suppose there is that cognitive control. There's also, I suppose, mood issues associated with perimenopause and menopause, of course, just feeling down and rubbish about yourself. So that's where an eating disorder can unfortunately readily take hold.
For sure. I was just wondering if there was any specific type of eating disorder that tends to be more prevalent at this time of life, or is it quite sort of across the board?
Yeah. Do you know, again, we need more research. I'd love to be able to tell you that with more authority, Zoe. But I think what we do see is, and this is pretty understandable, I suppose more of those restrictive types of eating disorders, so more in the anorexia spectrum. Orthorexia is not considered a classic diagnostic eating disorder, but I suppose people who are sort of obsessed with clean eating, that is another thing we might see at this stage of life. And of course, what comes with any kind of restriction is binge eating. Yeah. And we know that hormonal fluctuations affect binges. So, yeah, we can see both restriction and binge eating all within that menopause phase.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back after this. Okay, we're back.
So if we are feeling, maybe uncomfortable or unhealthy within ourselves, and we do, we want to make some positive body changes, and especially for someone that perhaps has had a history of disordered eating, how can they navigate or approach that in a way that would be healthy and not lead to potentially a disordered eating down the track?
I think particularly for people who have a bit of a history of disordered eating disorders, I wouldn't be doing this without health professional oversight, just because it is a very slippery slope back into those old habits, unfortunately. So I think it might be, and I think everyone should visit their GP at least once a year. And I know sometimes it's hard to get in with our GPs. They're doing a great job, by the way. They're very busy and overworked. But I think it would be about, getting some routine tests done with your GP to actually find out what your health status is. Is there an issue? Maybe there isn't, but you're just wanting to feel better. You're like, hey, maybe I just want to up my exercise, for example, or maybe I want to eat some different things, like a wider variety of foods. These are all very logical things that people want to do without necessarily slipping into an eating disorder. And I think if you have that GP oversight, maybe dietitian, maybe personal trainer, if that's what people want to do, then by all means. But I would always recommend oversight, particularly with a history of illness.
Yeah, absolutely. So say there has been no history and you've been going about it your own way. What are some perhaps signs or red flags that indicate that you maybe have started going down that slippery slope, that you've stepped beyond a healthy kind of relationship with food?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's very hard for the person within themselves to know this. So I think it might be others making comments, as much as we might not like hearing them, that might let us know, oh, this is getting a bit obsessional. This is really taking over my life. This has gone beyond a goal of losing a bit of weight, for example, and become really my kind of focus in life. So I think when it starts impacting normal daily functioning, that's generally when we look out for it. So some examples would be, say, someone who declines going to restaurants because they don't know what's in the food, for example, like declining social activities because they want to spend more time in the gym. So reneging on things that they used to do and enjoy, because that's often the sign of disordered eating disorders, that you sort of ask people, what did you like to do in the past? And they'll be like, oh, I really used to enjoy painting and art and horse riding. And you go, oh, do you do those things now? No. No, my life is taken over. So it's quite obvious when you ask those kinds of questions, but for the person themselves, it can be a little difficult for them to see it. So it might take a loved one to go, hey, I really want to talk to you about this. I'm a little concerned. I just want to help you with your quality of life, and I wonder what that's like at the moment, because I can assure you they're not having a super fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to what you were saying before about the pieces of the pie that are so important to keep our self-worth, on an even keel. And so when all those pieces get taken away, then it's just exacerbating the problem even further.
Exactly. I mean, we talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. Now, there's no one on earth who would recommend that, right? So why would we put all our eggs in our physical appearance basket? That is a dangerous thing to do.
For sure. And so are there any other resources or support networks available for women who may be really struggling with their self-worth during this stage of their lives?
Yeah, I think Jean Hales have excellent resources on women's health across the age spectrum, and they're particularly well known for their menopause support. So a big shout out to Jean Hales for their wonderful work there. Yeah. I suppose for Victorian residents who are particularly struggling with sort of longer standing eating disorders in conjunction with menopause, Eating Disorders Victoria has a wonderful program. So do reach out to them. We've been working with them on this new menopause research. So we're really hoping to get those resources out there as fast as possible. And the support we've had so far has been terrific.
All right. Well, was there anything else you felt like it's important for women to know in terms of either self-worth or managing their diets at this point, or their eating habits at this point in life?
Thank you for that question. And I think whenever I talk about eating and exercise, I always take it from a lens of enjoyment, because I think if you're hating on exercise, maybe you're not doing the right kind or what you find fun, because if you want to maintain a habit, you need to enjoy it virtually. Absolutely. So if you're hating on running, maybe that's not your favorite thing. Maybe it's tennis. I'm not sure, but yes, we can certainly have enjoyable movement where we appreciate what our body can do. And food is meant to be enjoyed as well. It's not meant to be suffered. So I think, eat intuitively, eat what you enjoy. And, if you feel like you want more support, there are definitely health professionals to help you design a meal plan if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, please eat what you enjoy, because life's too short to not enjoy movement and food.
Well, look, Dr. Sharp, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's been an absolute huge honour to do this research so far, and I hope I might be able to come and chat with you good folks again when we found out even more.
We hope you'll join us for our next episode, where we'll be discussing a very common condition in menopause, and one which many women suffer in silence, which is very heavy periods. Meanwhile, for more great information about living your best life at midlife, pick up a copy of Prevention magazine. I'm Zoe Mernier. See you next episode.